Our friend Will Ricardella from the Washington Examiner is back in the mix, back in action here with us now. He is at the Washington Examiner. Will, great to have you.
Thanks for having me back, Buck.
So I know you're very very clear on your thoughts on the legitimacy. If we're going to say that the Senate has rules beyond what are kind of official rules, right? The senators can. That the McConnell rule doesn't preclude, if anyone even cares, which I honestly don't, but the McConnell, I mean, meaning that, I think that the rules are the rules. But if people are going to hold them to the McConnell rule, there's no reason not to fill the seat. Explain.
Yeah, look, the McConnell rule, if it is a rule, and if that's what the left wants to use, that's the exact reason why Donald Trump has the authority to nominate a judge and for the Senate to hold a vote. Look, he said, this is when Barack Obama was president, obviously. In 2016, I'm sorry, in 2014, when the Senate won, when the GOP won the Senate, Barack Obama was president. That's when there was Antonin Scalia died thereafter. They wanted Barack Obama nominated somebody. Mitch McConnell said, "Look, we just had an election here in the midterms. We took the Senate. The people obviously want to change. Let's wait and see what happens for the next election. Let's make this a referenda about judges." 2016 was in large part, about the next president nominating judges and that GOP Senate approving them. So if the McConnell rule is a reason, or the left using the McConnell rule as a reason not to appoint judges, is absurd. It's the exact reason why they should nominate and appoint judges.
What do you think they're going to do? I mean, I keep asking people this because I'm wondering if there's some plot that I haven't. I'm just sitting here trying to war game out. Because, man, they are losing their minds over this empty seat right now. The timing for them, the timing for them is bad. There's no good. The Democrats, they are, this is not good for them. I'm not going to pretend like I'm not kind of enjoying how bad it is for them. But do you see any pathway that they have in any realm to try to stop this?
No,
what are they going to do?
I see their attempts as damaging. Look, what the left is saying right now is, we want the opportunity to appoint a judge. Well, they're coming up with every way to violate the Constitution or to denude it entirely by saying, we're going to pack the courts with people who like liberal orthodoxy. The problem here with these things being so contentious is that leftist activist judges turned the court into a political body where once stood a neutral legal institution, and it's completely insulated from the body politic, from democratic process. The left did that. And what they're saying is, hey, we're going to double down more on this lunacy. And it's not going to win over any of the people. This is actually going to probably help Donald Trump coming up in the 2020 election. It helped him in 2016 when Mitch McConnell said, let's wait for the next election. People in large part wanted Donald Trump to be the one to appoint these judges. I don't think people, and this is going back, I read Robert Bort's book. I'm rereading his book, Attempting of America. He wrote in 1990. Even at that time, Americans and polls and so on showed that they wanted neutral justices, not activists on the court. And I think that still holds today. And I think that works in Trump's favor. And the left just going bananas, saying he's packing the court because he gets to nominate another justice, is absurd. They're coming up with these crazy, we're going to get 2 more states and we're going to have 4 more senators. They want to add Puerto Rico into D.C. in order to, they want to abolish the electoral college. They want to destroy the Constitution and then at the same time say, hey, look, we're trying to save. I mean, that's pure absurdity.
Speaking of Will Ricardella down at the Washington Examiner, there are protests that I see. Friends of mine in D.C. are posting video from their windows of the marches in the streets that are going on there. I think people often forget D.C. is, after San Francisco, the most liberal, most Democrat-heavy major city in America, and by party affiliation. I mean, D.C., the swamp is as blue as it gets, and you have these marchers, as well as the people that come from out of state, these more Antifa-style agitators who will join in with the lunatics in D.C. Are you expecting, I mean, are there preparations going on now for, unrest, riots, things like that leading up to the election and beyond? I mean, how are things looking down in D.C.?
Well, they should be prepared because since May 25th, since the George Floyd death, there's been something going on every single day, riots, Donald Trump had the his RNC acceptance speech at the White House. That was a debacle. This goes on every single day. And I want to add that DC is not liberal. These are socialist Marxists. These are people who are down for the cause. I'm talking the everyday people on the streets, the people who live here. I'll walk down the street without a mask on. I'll have people telling me to put one on, looking at me nasty, walking completely around. Walk on the street. They'd rather dodge cars and walk past me on the street just because I don't wear a mask if I'm walking or running.
Why can't we get Dr. Fauci? I mean, he loves the press so much. Tell everybody, hey, stop yelling at people who are by themselves out in open air, on a sunny day to wear a mask. You're being a jackass. That should, because that is what the science universally says. There's absolutely no justification for a person by himself out in open air having to wear a mask. It does not exist. Why can't we hear that from these health authorities? It would be nice to, de-escalate some of the insanity a little bit.
Well, it's typical of the expert class, the elite class. What if there's no panic? Why would anybody listen to Dr. Fauci? You see this guy on Times 100 list. Again, I say this every time I come on, that In Style magazine with the sunglasses on, and he's sitting there with his legs crossed. If people aren't panicked or scared or yelling at each other, they wouldn't look to Dr. Fauci for anything. 6 months ago, no one knew who this guy was. 6 months later, he still hasn't gotten a thing right. Not one thing right. Tells you wear a mask, don't wear a mask, kids, this is going to harm. Remember that whole thing where he was talking to Rand Paul several months ago about how this is terrible for kids and it's going to give them the Kawasaki disease? That just disappeared. Never did anybody say this guy was brutally wrong. It just disappeared out of the headlines, and people are still listening to him. Again, I think it would be a good move for Donald Trump to fire him ahead of the election and say, we're not going to be run by an unelected expert class anymore. And they're not going to pit him. I'm not going to allow them to pit Americans against Americans. I think that would be a good move for him.
I think so too. I'm worried that we're already transitioning now into another moving of the goalposts where, because you're seeing this, Will. I mean, it's coming out from some of the different folks. I saw the testimony today on Capitol Hill from Redfield over at the CDC, and they're already starting to say, well, even when the vaccine comes, like, we got to keep all these restrictions in place. Oh, so now it's post-vaccine lockdown world we're supposed to live in. I mean, these people are completely insane.
Oh, yeah. They're beholden. They love the control. Look, I want to tell the viewers out there that a mask walking past somebody's not going to help you. There's only one way that this disease spread long before mask mandates and now, and that's 15 minutes close contact, mainly indoors. If you're an older, vulnerable person, that's what you should probably want to avoid. You don't really need to worry so much when you're at the grocery store. These are not major vectors for spread. The mask will not protect you if you're in a situation with somebody who's 15 minutes or longer of close contact. That's talking, shaking hands indoors. I don't know why the CDC just won't come out and say that. I think that they think that, these vulnerable people wear a mask and then they can hang out in those situations still. The CDC actually has it on their website saying it's not going to make a difference. It may help. Well, what may help is if I cover my cough or sneeze with my hand or my arm. So, it's very inconsistent. No one knows what they're talking about. That's the problem here. And no one's been fired for it. Again, look, all these Americans, we make a mistake at our jobs, we get fired. Okay. And then we have a hard time on our resume getting another job because we don't have a recommendation. This has never happened. This isn't going to happen to Dr. Fauci. And the problem is it hasn't happened since he was since he was a bureaucrat in the 80s. He's probably made several hundred mistakes and still has a job. It's fascinating. And no American can really identify with it because if we make the same mistake, we're out of a job.
Will Ricardella of the Washington Examiner, everybody. Will, always good to talk to you, man. Come back soon.
Thanks, Buck. Thank you.
Yeah, we've wanted to see a Phase 4 relief bill get to the American people. It's why the Chief of Staff and Secretary Mnuchin have been in negotiations. Unfortunately, though, they've been in negotiations with a fundamentally unserious partisan named Speaker Pelosi, who, when we would exceed what she asked for with school funding, let's say, she then would reject the money that was in excess of what she had previously asked for. Democrats, I think, showed what they were about when they filibustered a bill that would have provided $300 a week to the American people through December 27th. They filibustered that, I believe, last week. So at this point, the onus is really on Speaker Pelosi. So we encourage her to send one-off bills, perhaps airline funding or other elements that we could work through the process to get to the American people. It's always been this president's priority to do that.
Why isn't there a COVID relief bill? Everyone agrees there should be. The government continues to mandate that businesses can't operate, can't open. There's not a COVID relief bill because Nancy Pelosi doesn't want there to be. And her claim is just not enough. So nothing is better than something in Pelosi's view. If you're suffering right now, if your business is closing, if you can't pay your bills, Nancy Pelosi wants it to be clear that you need to keep suffering. And then her justification for it is, oh, no, I want to get you more. Well, let me tell you, that's very little comfort to people who have a hard time actually paying the bills that they currently have. It's very little comfort indeed. The other thing that you're hearing a lot these days now is we've returned to mask shaming. Just in time for the election. I'm seeing a lot of this now. And I'm so fed up with New Yorkers who are overwhelmingly Democrats, 8-1 Democrats, who are just little mask maniacs now. They're wearing them. They're on a bicycle by themselves by the Hudson River. Nobody around them. They're moving fast. They got a mask on. And look, if they want to do it, I don't care. But they're doing it and they expect you do it too. Outside, bend the knee, wear a mask. Why? Because that's what the good people do, you see? This is how Democrat brainwashing works. This is how they do things. I got to say, I liked earlier today, I'm trying to see if I can find it here on the fly. There was a Matt Walsh tweet. When the left is upset about something, we board up our homes and call in the National Guard, he writes. There's no both sides argument here. Leftism is evil. It's a blight on the earth, and everything about it is bad. I agree. I don't respect the Democrat ideology. I don't think that it has some good stuff anymore. I think they've really become terrible. They've really become something that just needs to be defeated. But the mask mania is just a part of it. And there's the mask shaming. Of course, here's Chris Cuomo, who likes to lecture America about obeying the COVID rules while he's going between his various houses in the Hamptons as a multimillionaire, checking to see while he's COVID positive and very sick. But, he's a good guy to listen to on this. Play 13.
Third worst loss of life in our history. I'm sorry for the family's loss. And I'm sorry that you had to hear this from your president.
It affects virtually nobody. It's an amazing thing.
Then this I'll never lie to you press secretary tells you the death toll has the president awake at night, so worried that he stands maskless in front of a tight crowd again tonight telling jokes instead of holding maybe a moment of silence for the 200,000 stolen by this pandemic, maybe trying to prevent some of these good people in this crowd who are too close together and without masks from sharing their fate.
First of all, a lot of them were wearing masks. I watched the rally last night as it happened. A lot of them were wearing masks. Not everybody, but if a mask works, shouldn't that, why do we never get partial credit? This is important. Think about this. You have 100 people in a room, and you don't know how many of them have COVID, maybe 2, maybe 10. It's going to be a small number. But 50% of the people are wearing masks. If masks are so effective, then we should feel like we're probably going to be okay, right? It's not that easy for this to spread. I'm just saying. 50% is better than 0. It's substantially better, isn't it? And then there was a big chunk from what I could see on the screens, big chunk of them were wearing masks. Even though, let's also remember that if they're outside, should they wear a mask? Is that the same thing? Wearing a mask outside? Where was all this outrage from Cuomo over at CNN when there were daily mass gatherings outside, sometimes masked, a lot of times not masked, over the BLM movement? I'm sorry, I haven't forgotten yet that the blue check MDs out there, not all of them, but a lot of them, were trying to convince us that, well, even if it spreads the virus, these BLM protests are worth it. What they were saying. That was the real story from them. Even if it spreads the virus, the BLM protests are worth it. Oh, okay. I'm never letting that go. And something else I want to tell you about, too, because there's so little time. I mean, we've lost the COVID narrative battle on the right, and people that try to keep this all in perspective. We've lost the dominant narrative in all of this because the left has they've been utterly relentless. But, there was a piece that's making the rounds now from a former senior scientist at Pfizer in the UK talking about PCR testing. Now, I don't want to get too... Look, I'm not a scientist, but I can read and I understand a lot of stuff. Certainly more than CNN anchors do. And here's what I can tell you what he's saying about the test. There's a very small percentage of overall, when these PCR tests are done, a very small percentage of people actually have COVID who are, when they're doing these tests. Let's say it's for every 10,000 tests they're doing, let's say if you're looking at 1% of people that actually have COVID, you extrapolate that number, there's always also a false positive rate. And the false positive rate for PCR testing on COVID right now is looking to be like it's substantial. You're not exactly sure what it is, but it's built in. It has to be substantial. And right now, based on he walks you through how based on very widespread testing, where they're doing thousands and thousands and thousands of tests every day, there, at least in the UK, he's talking in the context of the UK, based on the numbers that they see of the percentage of the population with COVID overall that are doing these tests, because a vast majority of people that do the tests do not come back, or do not actually have COVID, I should say. And the false positive number, by percentages, the false positive number is larger than the positive number per every 10,000 tests done. Now, it's not a lot out of 100. You think, okay, well, 2% of cases are false positives. Well, think about how many false positive cases then you're generating every day when you're doing 10,000 tests. And if only 1% of the population actually has COVID, but 2% of the population is testing positive through these, and it's established. I mean, this is not a conspiracy. PCR testing has a false positive rate. They'll find a strand of like decayed RNA from a virus infection from 6 months ago, positive. So it's at least 2 or 3% false positive rate. So if you're, and I know this sounds a lot, but if your overall actual COVID positivity out of every 10,000 person sample is about 1%, and your PCR test false positive is 2 or 3%, guess what? Most of the cases in the UK under this model that they're reporting as COVID positive, who are overwhelmingly asymptomatic, don't actually have COVID. Look at the numbers. In New York, we're below 1% of cases are positive in New York City. So if you have a 2 or 3% false positive rate, you're doing 10,000 tests a day, guess what? Oh, I can't forget about that Senate report and Joe Biden, son Hunter Biden, and what we see going on with all that. Here's a thread that explains some of this from Kim Strassel of the Wall Street Journal. The Johnson-Grassley report raises the many and disturbing conflicts of interest surrounding Hunter's business dealings while Joe was vice president. But it also makes clear the Democratic nominee is not being straight with the public. Joe Biden last year said, "I've never spoken to my son about his overseas business dealings." That's pretty definitive, right? Yet according to testimony from former Obama official Amos Hochstein, he briefed Joe on his concerns about Hunter and Burisma in October 2015. And shortly after his conversation with Vice President Biden, Hunter Biden contacted Hochstein and asked to meet. According to Hochstein, Hunter became aware of Hochstein's West Wing conversation with the vice president, who had mentioned it to Hunter. So, Joe Biden was specifically briefed on the U.S. government's concerns about Hunter and Burisma, and he specifically brought up those concerns to his son. How does that comport with, I have never spoken? If Joe isn't asked about this at the debate, it's journalistic malpractice. Well, then we know it's not going to happen. The report similarly shows that despite former Secretary of State John Kerry saying he had no knowledge of any of this, he in fact was also briefed on Hunter Biden. Seems a lot of people in the Obama administration knew this was a problem, but nobody acted. This is all relevant given Biden's claim he is a more ethical choice in this election. Voters might legitimately ask if the wink-not approach to Hunter's wheeling-dealing will be business as usual in a Biden administration. So now that's the a very good version of the takeaway here that you should all have from this. But I'll give you some of the specifics, as people are saying Hunter Biden, was. I love this. The New York Times: Republican inquiry finds no evidence of wrongdoing by Hunter Biden. That's the New York Times headline. The New York Post headline, same report they're talking about. Quote, Senate report links Hunter Biden to prostitution or human trafficking ring. Oh, that seems like a very different takeaway than what the Democrats had. Hunter Biden sent thousands of dollars to people who appear to be involved in the sex industry, according to a report released Wednesday by Republicans in the U.S. Senate. The report says, this is the New York Post version, unspecified records show that Biden sent funds to non-resident alien women in the United States who are citizens of Russia and Ukraine and who have subsequently wired funds they've received from Hunter Biden to individuals located in Russia and Ukraine. The records also note that some of these transactions are linked to what appear to be Eastern European prostitution or human trafficking rings. The allegations are contained in a footnote to a section of the report that details potential criminal concerns and extortion threats involving the son of Democratic Vice Presidential and former Vice President Joe Biden, the Democratic presidential nominee, rather, and other members of the Biden family. The report cites extensive public reporting concerning Hunter Biden's alleged involvement with prostitution services. Records on file with the committees do not directly confirm or refute these individual reports. So, yeah, they're saying Hunter Biden spends a lot of money on prostitutes who are tied to human trafficking. Now, look, I understand you can say, Buck, that's the son, it's not Joe Biden. Is it? Do you think, let's ask the question, just so we could all be on the same page here. Do you think that if Donald Trump Jr. was sending thousands and thousands of dollars to prostitutes that he was now using the services of, and including prostitutes who might be tied to human trafficking rings, so they themselves are perhaps being human trafficked, and their money, the proceeds they're making from that process is going to the horrific process of human trafficking other people as well, from the overlords that are doing all this stuff, Russian mob and so on and so forth. Do you think that if Donald Trump Jr. was involved in that, it would not be the biggest news story in the country for a couple of days? And all the news outlets would be saying, oh my gosh. Yeah. We all know this, right? I mean, the double standard is mind-blowing, but it is certainly real. You can't avoid it. You can't assume that it's going to get any better either. It's actually going to get worse between now and Election Day. But the Burisma stuff, look, I was working with John Solomon at thehill.com at the time when he was breaking those stories, and they were pushing all this stuff on the Burisma. Friends, yeah, it's corrupt. It's bad. It's also not going to win us the election. It's also not going to lead to the ultimate gotcha moment. Democrats are fine with corruption on their side, and the media will just ignore how gross it is. So we can make as much noise about it as we want, but this dog won't hunt, friends. The Burisma thing is not, I was never a proponent of how this is going to take down. I know some people on some shows, it's a constant, Ukraine, Burisma update and everything else. I don't like making false promises to my audience about what I think is going to be achievable by the GOP or achievable by our side in politics. I didn't do it with Benghazi. I didn't do it with the Hunter Biden Burisma thing. I certainly haven't done it with the Durham probe. Where how many months now have I been telling you I don't think the Durham probe is going to lead to really much of anything? I always tell this audience the truth. Too much respect for you. and too much care for your respect for me to do otherwise. So while the Burisma story is interesting and it's valid, look, clearly the guy, it's corruption, but it's not criminal corruption that is going to cost Joe Biden the election. So how much more do we really want to talk? I mean, it's a little amusing because the double standard and everything with the Democrats, and it's also galling. But how much more do we really want to talk about Hunter Biden? I mean, the guy's a degenerate loser, and, Joe Biden is obviously they're not going to hold him accountable. The media's not going to hold him accountable for his son, even if they would do that to a Republican. So I think it's a story that I'll keep you updated on, but don't expect, smoking gun here. Don't expect bombshell. Hunter Biden, this guy impregnated a stripper in the back of a seedy club in D.C. and then tried to fight the paternity payments, okay? That's who the soon-to-be, if the Democrats have their way, President of the United States' son is. Media has no problem with it.
It's time for roll call.
Roll call, everybody. Thank you so much for sticking with us to this point in the show. I think that this is one of our favorite parts of the show. So it's always fun when you get to this point. And let's jump into it, shall we? Facebook.com/Buck Sexton, TeamBuck@iHeartMedia.com if you want to email us or if you want to send a Facebook message. Instagram, Buck Sexton. Let's do it. Brad writes, "Hey, Buck, I like that you played President Trump's reaction to RBG's passing. I consider myself to be good at reading people and their expressions. I encourage you and your listeners to check out the actual video of that reaction. If you watch his eyes, you can see a very genuine person who cares about a life. You would never get that kind of reaction out of Hillary when she learned of Benghazi or Biden when he referred to George Floyd. They just look like someone who lost a pawn in a chess game, shields high." Brad, I do think that Trump doesn't get enough credit for what is really a fundamental human decency and sympathy that is a part of who he is. I think that the left likes to just always portray him as an evil monster who's racist and a sexist and a rapist and all these things. But people who actually know the guy will tell you that he can be very sympathetic. He likes to help people out. He can be too loyal. It is one of these things. When you go to a job interview and they say, tell me your weaknesses. And you say, so I take too much into my own hands and share too much of the credit, right? I mean, people try to play that. But there are some failings that come from a good place. And I mean, loyalty can be one of them. It is possible to be too loyal to people that work with you. It is possible to be too loyal to people that you've appointed into certain roles. And I think Trump, that is his thing. Now, his loyalty doesn't extend to people who trash him or who go against him, obviously. People are saying, oh, but look who works for Trump. Yeah, I mean, if you go at Trump, he's going to go back at you. But you see the people that he gave jobs to and that he's stuck with through a lot. And, I got to say, that's one of the areas where I think the president, I appreciate where he's coming from on it, but it has been a tough thing for him, and I think it's cost him at different times. Chris, next up here. Hey, Buck and Mark, completely enjoy your daily podcast and have since your 2-hour show at the Blaze. Love to hear Mark as your resident sports anchor, or at least I will until the Mets, Knicks, Giants, or Rangers actually start winning, whereupon he'll become an obnoxious and insufferable New Yorker. Just want to let you know that another Californian has left the building. No longer will I pay the highest income, sales, carbon, or gas taxes in the nation. No longer will my exceedingly high taxes go toward a bottom 5 education, roads, crime, homelessness, or friendliness. Idaho doesn't have the lowest taxes in the nation, but the whole state is so friendly that I've strained my arm muscles waving to everyone. Masks are mostly optional. I love it in Idaho. I moved here, and instantly my daily anger with the left and their stupid short-sighted policy subsided. So don't move here. I need you to stay edgy and angry because that's why you're so entertaining. Well, Chris, don't worry about that because it's certainly getting more and more tense in New York these days. I can't handle these libs. They're just nuts. They're just nuts. But Mark's not a New Yorker. You don't really have much of a New York. I mean, I can pick it up a tiny bit. You don't really have much of a New York accent.
I used to. And then when I decided I wanted to be into broadcasting, I realized you can't have a New York accent and be doing play-by-play for games. So I got rid of it.
What are the like? What makes a good play-by-play? And like I could say on a political talk radio, one thing that I always look for is this somebody who has a cadence that is easy and enjoyable to listen to and follow, and beyond that is saying things that are not exactly the same that everyone else is saying, right? Those are just some of the things you want for a good political talk radio host. What makes a good play-by-play guy?
I was always told when I was coming up by my mentors to be conversational. Act like you're having a conversation with the audience, even though you're telling them what's happening. And you want good energy. You want a good cadence. You don't want somebody to be boring. You want a play-by-play guy to pick the right spots to go crazy. Like Mike Breen, for example. I know a lot of people aren't watching the NBA, but when you did, he's the main guy on ESPN and ABC, calls the finals and whatnot, but he has his signature call, bang, and he knows when to pull it out at the right time. So the best guys like that just know when to have the right energy, pick their moments, and are always clear and concise with how they call things, and they set up their analyst well. That's always important too.
Who's the guy who was like, it's pandemonium, baby? Is that Dick Vitale?
Yeah, he's not a play-by-play announcer. He's a color commentator.
Wait, what? That's not the same thing?
Oh, I think. The play-by-play guy is the one who goes, they score!
Oh, so
and
the play-by-play is the one who's like, and Smith passes the ball to Dominguez. Dominguez passes the ball back to Johnson. Johnson, that's okay. But isn't that, wait. So color commentary, I don't know. Like
nowadays,
is Marv Albert play-by-play or color commentary?
Play-by-play. So nowadays, a color commentator usually is a former player or coach.
Ah, okay.
So they're analyzing what just happened and giving you background information and telling you why it happened, stuff like that.
And they work kind of as a team. I got it now. So you got the one guy who's like, and they're passing it through, and they're doing, and then the other guy's like, yeah, that was a really like good call, or so. So they work together.
Exactly.
Now I understand. Okay, because I was like, how does that work if there's one guy doing the play-by-play, one guy doing, because I've heard before on the radio just straight play-by-play, right? That'll happen too, like for baseball games.
There's a difference between radio and television. On television, the analyst will speak more. On radio, you want to hear what's happening. So the play-by-play guys.
That's what okay. All right, I learn something new every day. Adam writes, hey, Buck, producer Mark is gorgeous, or whatever I have to say to get this aired. But I want your opinion on this. Hey, Adam, here you are, buddy. Success. If the Republicans end up not confirming a new Supreme Court justice, do you think it's really because they want to gain brownie points with the left should Biden end up winning? Or are we to believe this great moral quandary believe it to be this great moral quandary when we know it's not? Love your show. Shields high. No, I think they're going to do it, Adam. So I think that they're going to do it. So I can't really answer your why would Republicans not do it, because there is no good reason. So they're going to do it. We're gonna get this. I don't overpromise on this show. That's one thing I try very hard. I don't overpromise to you guys what I think is going to happen. I think we're going to get this Supreme Court nominee through, and I think we're going to do it before the election. I think it needs to happen before the election. David writes, is Amy Coney Barrett willing to not be liked? Roberts changed his mind because he wants to be liked. David, it's a good question. I'd like to say the answer is yes, although I don't have much to go on with that other than my gut, my instinct. So, yeah, I think she probably is. As a mother of 7 who is pro-life and avowedly pro-life and is a Catholic and doesn't care that people mock her faith, I think she probably is willing to take the slings and arrows, so to speak. Kirk, Buck, on Monday's show, you played AOC's comment that we must vote for Biden to protect our democracy and protect the most innocent and vulnerable. Are you kidding me? What irony. It is the left and RBG. You guys got to stop writing RGB, because I'm Ruth Bader Ginsburg, RBG, God rest her soul, that are responsible for maintaining and supporting laws that actually do kill the most innocent. It is the innocent in the womb via abortion. I'm sorry, but that one tops them all. As you often say, the left has absolutely no shame. It shows that we are not just in the middle of a political battle, but we are oftentimes in the middle of a spiritual battle. The fight over the next Supreme Court seat is, for sure, both. Well said, sir. Well said. Scott, Buck, as a Supreme Court justice, where are the inherent apolitical standard needs to be met, or where the inherent political standard needs to be met? We had a justice holding on for pure political purposes. While RBG had a right to serve until death, no one wants to discuss the ethical breach of why she chose to do so. By the way, your sports talk with producer Mark cracks me up. Reminds me of hanging out with the girlfriend back in the day talking sports. Love the show. Whoa, Scott. Hey, I know what you're saying with that. Like I'm the girl that needs producer Mark to explain how the touchdowns happen or something. Whatever.
I mean, that is exactly what happens.
Whatever. I demand the recount. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for listening today. Check out bucksexton.com. Pass the buck to somebody in your life. Tell them to download this show. iHeart app, Spotify, iTunes. Till tomorrow. Shields high.